My son said I didn't raise him right, so I sent him back the unpaid child support receipts. Mom's trying to bill me for my childhood, I kid you not. She actually sent me a binder full of receipts. That was the caption. It sat just above a poorly lit photo of the binder I had mailed him. 3 inches thick, neatly tabbed, each page bearing dates, names of daycare centers, school payments, doctor visits, grocery lists, clothing purchases, all in my aging handwriting. Decades of motherhood, reduced to a meme. He didn't call me when it arrived, he posted. Within an hour, the comments were coming in fast. Wow, imagine having a mom like this. You should charge her for the therapy you'll need. Sue her. This is emotional abuse. And then, the one that gutted me the most. She probably raised you poor and now wants you to make up for it. Pathetic. That was the narrative now. My life was rewritten by a child I carried through fevers, bullies, broken bones, and broken promises. One who now saw me not as the woman who made his life possible, but as the villain in his origin story. I sat on the edge of my bed, binder still in my lap, and stared at the screen. My phone buzzed. It was him. I answered. "You seriously thought this was okay?" he said, skipping any greeting. "I thought it was time you knew," I said calmly. "Time I knew what? That you kept every penny you ever spent on me like it was a tab? What kind of mother keeps score like that?" "I kept receipts," I said, "because no one else was helping. Not your father, not the government, not the neighbors who talked behind our backs." "Still not my problem," he snapped. "And now everyone thinks I was some kind of burden. You made me look like charity." "You weren't charity," I said softly. "You were my child. But love doesn't pay the bills." That silenced him for half a second. Then he dropped the bomb. "Well, I talked to Dad. He's willing to support me on this. We're getting a lawyer. You can expect to hear from them soon." I froze. "You found your father?" "Yeah, and he agrees. What you did is harassment. It's unhinged. You don't send a legal-looking invoice to your own kid unless you've lost your mind." I felt a long, slow heat rise in my chest. Not anger, not even fear, just something ancient, heavy. I kept my voice even. "Did you also tell him he owes you nearly $70,000, 0 cents in unpaid child support?" He didn't answer. "Because that's in the binder too," I continued. "Court-ordered payments from 1997 to 2015, 0 made. I covered them, every last one. I didn't take him to court because I didn't want you growing up in a war zone. But if he wants to talk lawyers—" "Enough!" he yelled. "You're not the victim here, Mom. You never were." He hung up. I sat in silence, the click of the call ending still echoing in my ears. Victim? No. But I was the woman who gave up every plan she ever had to make sure one little boy never went to sleep hungry. I was the woman who cried in a walk-in freezer on her 3rd restaurant job shift because her shoes had holes and the cold cut through her bones. I was the woman who had to choose between rent and asthma medicine, who lied to bill collectors, who sold her only nice coat for extra tutoring sessions, who once walked 8 miles because the bus money had to buy him a notebook. But I never told him any of that. I just smiled and said, "It's okay, baby, Mommy's fine." Now he wanted to sue me for telling the truth. Not in anger, not in bitterness, just truth. That binder wasn't revenge, it was record. A story he had never asked for, but deeply needed, and he turned it into a public joke. I walked to my garage, past the old washing machine that rattled too much, and opened the trunk of memories I kept sealed. Inside, Polaroids, report cards, birthday cards with childish scribbles, a broken toy car he once cried over, and under it all, a court document. Yellowed at the edges, signed and stamped, it stated clearly, his father was ordered to pay $327, 0 cents per month in child support from July 1997 until June 2015. $0 had been received. 18 years. 0, and I never told him. I thought it was kinder to let him believe his father was just far away. Not indifferent, not selfish, just absent. So I worked, I bent, I broke, I endured, and now both father and son stood on the other side of a courtroom line I never wanted to draw. I didn't post. I didn't comment. I didn't engage. But I did go to the print shop. I made 4 more copies of the binder, color-coded tabs, laminated sections, cross-referenced dates with report cards and clinic visits. I even included old pay stubs, receipts from used clothing stores, and a letter from a teacher thanking me for helping out with supplies that year. Each binder had a letter inside. This is not to hurt you. It is to remind you of the truth. When you rewrite our story, I want you to at least use the right ink. I addressed them. 1 to my son, 1 to his father, 1 to the lawyer, 1 to myself, and the 5th I sealed and wrote, for my granddaughter, should she ever need to know who her grandmother really was. Then I sat down, made a cup of tea, and stared out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. Sometimes, you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes, you just have to stop pretending you were ever invisible. There was a time I thought I could sleep when he did. I learned better quickly. When he was asleep, I cleaned houses. I flipped eggs at the diner from 4 a.m. until 10. I came home, showered, changed into the janitor uniform, and mopped the school hallways where he'd someday learn to read. By the time I got home at night, my hands smelled like bleach and bacon grease, and my knees ached from stairs, corners, baseboards. I'd sit on the floor to take off my shoes because the act of bending felt like too much. But I never told him that. To him, I was just Mom. I wasn't exhausted, I was just quiet. I wasn't cold, I was thinking. I wasn't hungry, I was on a diet. I never let him see the backaches, the bill notices, the way I counted pennies before grocery store visits. I made sure the light stayed on in his room, even if it meant mine stayed off. We didn't have birthday parties with rented clowns or pizza parlors. We had cake mix on sale, homemade banners, and one small gift, always practical. I wrapped his first dictionary like it was gold. He thought we were fine. That was the point. I remember once, when he was 10, a boy at school laughed at his shoes. They were hand-me-downs from a church family. He came home angry. "Why can't I just have normal shoes?" he shouted. I didn't answer. I just smiled and handed him the snack I'd made. He ate in silence, and I washed the dishes slowly. That night, I sewed patches into the soles of those shoes. By morning, they didn't squeak anymore. He never knew. I didn't take assistance, not because I was too proud, but because I didn't qualify. The system said I made too much working 3 jobs. They never asked what rent cost or how many weeks a bottle of antibiotics could blow up a budget. As for his father, I stopped expecting help the day he slammed the door behind him and never came back. The court-ordered payments, he ignored them. I thought of suing again. I even called legal aid once. They put me on hold so long I had to hang up and rush to my night shift. I never called back. Instead, I wiped down tables at a taco joint until 1 a.m., where the manager once told me I was too old to move that fast. I moved faster. I picked up side gigs cleaning Airbnbs, folding laundry for elderly couples, even sewing buttons on uniforms for a local dry cleaner. Every penny I earned, I recorded. That's why I had the binder, because when no one remembers what you gave, the records become your only memory. He never asked where things came from. The field trips, the after-school music lessons, the orthodontist. He never knew I sold my great-grandmother's necklace to pay for his braces, or that I used to skip my lunch break at the diner so I could afford his summer camp. I wanted him to feel like he belonged. He did, until the day he said he didn't. It was at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. He was scrolling through his phone while I served mashed potatoes. His wife was setting the table. I was telling a story about when he was little, how he once cleaned the living room by shoving everything under the couch. He interrupted me not with a laugh, but with a sentence so sharp it cut the room in half. "You know, sometimes I felt embarrassed growing up. You always looked so tired, so poor." I froze, still holding the bowl. He didn't notice. He was still on his phone. I managed to smile. "I'm sorry you felt that way," he shrugged. "I just wish we'd had more." I looked down at the mashed potatoes. I didn't know what to say. His wife cleared her throat awkwardly and changed the subject. We ate in relative peace, but I couldn't forget that sentence, embarrassed to have me as a mother. That night I opened the storage trunk and pulled out every invoice I had ever saved. I found the tuition receipts from Lincoln Preparatory Academy, $6,200, 0 cents a year, paid in monthly installments. I found the summer camp charges, the art supply kits, the choir robe, rental. None of it was required. All of it was given and paid for by mopping floors at night, scrubbing kitchens before sunrise. When I mailed him the binder, I didn't include a note. I just tucked in a copy of one invoice. Lincoln Prep, tuition fee, $2007, $516, 0 cents paid in full. And below that, a faded business card from Sparkle Cleaners, where I worked evenings for cash. I didn't say anything. I let the numbers speak, but he didn't read it. He shared it. He mocked it. He made it public. I'm not angry he felt ashamed. I'm heartbroken he thought the solution was to erase me from the narrative, to pretend the work behind his education, his summer memories, his straight teeth, never happened. I don't need a thank you. I needed him to see me, to understand that what looked like being poor was in fact the greatest act of silent sacrifice I could offer. I gave him a world I could never afford for myself, and now I see he grew up thinking I gave him too little because I never told him what it cost. The restaurant was too quiet for what it was about to witness. I had chosen the booth in the back, not to be dramatic, but because some things are easier to survive with your back to the wall. He walked in first, my son, dressed sharply, tired eyes, his lips tight with anticipation, not fear, just annoyance. He didn't even greet me. Then came the ghost, my ex-husband, gray hair now, a belly, a smug look that hadn't aged a day. He slid into the booth across from me like it was any other Tuesday, like he hadn't missed 18 years of Tuesdays. "Hello, Ellen," he said coolly. I nodded. "Let's get this over with," my son muttered, pulling out his phone. "I want this to be civil." "Of course," I said. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin folder. "This is the draft notice from the attorney. It outlines the emotional distress caused by your recent actions. Also, potential defamation." I raised my hand slightly. "I'd like to go first." They stopped. Surprised, maybe, that I wasn't crying. I reached into my own bag and placed 2 thick binders on the table. One red, one black. I slid the red one to my ex-husband, the black to my son. "These are records," I said. "Receipts, court documents, pay stubs, statements from the school, letters from your pediatrician, 18 years of me raising a child by myself." My son shifted in his seat. My ex rolled his eyes. "I'm not paying for your filing habits," he scoffed. I looked him straight in the eye. "You were ordered to pay $327, 0 cents per month, starting July 1997, ending June 2015. You never paid a cent." I slid one last sheet across the table. A copy of the court order, his name printed in bold, the judge's signature beneath it. "You want to talk lawyers?" I asked calmly. "Start with this." He didn't touch it. My son opened the black binder reluctantly. I could see the skepticism turn to discomfort as he flipped the first few pages. Daycare receipts, the cost of school uniforms, bus passes, prescription bills, all paid in full, by me. "Mom," he started, but I kept going. "I didn't do this to shame you. I did it to show you the truth. You said I didn't raise you right, that I kept you poor, that I was a burden." I leaned forward. "I raised you alone, while he," I gestured toward my ex, "was living 5 miles away with another family." The silence cracked between us like dry ice in warm water. My ex finally stood. "This is pointless. You always did love the stage." "Funny," I said. "I always thought I was in the wings, holding everything together, while the men walked off." He grabbed the court paper, snorted. "You could have taken me to court again. I didn't want our son in courtrooms. I wanted him in classrooms." He left, didn't say goodbye. My son sat there for a long moment, flipping pages, quiet. I didn't interrupt. Finally, he closed the binder. "Why didn't you tell me any of this growing up?" I looked at him, eyes soft. "Because you were a child. I didn't want you to carry guilt. I wanted you to carry joy." He nodded, but I knew what that nod meant, not understanding, just acknowledgement, not remorse, just retreat. He stood, tucked the binder under his arm, and said, I still think you should have just talked to me before airing our dirty laundry. Then he walked away too. I stayed in that booth a while, ordered tea, let the steam rise and fade. 2 men had come into that room expecting me to fold. Instead, I laid the truth on the table, page by page. They left with it in their hands. What they did with it next was up to them. But I knew this much. There were no ghosts left in my house, only records. And a locked door to anyone who mistook silence for shame. I never responded to the post, not once. Not when it reached 5,000 shares, not when they started tagging me in the comments, not even when someone posted a photoshopped image of me holding a receipt like a pitchfork with the caption, "When your mom thinks she's the IRS." I let them talk. The digital crowd, loud and hungry, turned my life into entertainment. But something unexpected happened. Buried between the mockery, a voice rose. It was a girl, maybe in her 20s, who wrote, "Before you laugh, check the numbers. Single moms don't owe silence." Then another voice, older. I was that kid. I grew up thinking my mom failed me. Then I found out she worked 3 jobs while my dad went on vacations. Then came the screenshots. Someone found my son's old post from 2015, back when he graduated college. A photo of him in his cap and gown, beaming, and the caption read, "Wouldn't be here without my mom. Strongest woman I know, worked her fingers raw so I could fly." It had hundreds of likes. People started reposting it. Under his new post, the one calling me dramatic. The contradiction was jarring. One woman wrote, "So she was your hero when you were broke, but a villain now that you're successful?" Another, "It's funny how gratitude expires when your bank account fills up." A journalist picked up the story, anonymized of course, but the headline was unmistakable: "The mother who billed her son." And the truth she never spoke. It went viral, not because of me, because of what I represented. The quiet millions, the unseen labor, the myth that motherhood is martyrdom and mothers must never speak of cost. My son tried to fight back. He posted a video, polished, scripted. He sat at a desk, clean background, trying to look composed. "This isn't about money," he said. "It's about boundaries. It's about emotional manipulation." But it didn't land. Someone pointed out the $70,000, 0 cents in unpaid child support from his father. Another questioned why a grown man would humiliate his own mother publicly instead of speaking privately. His credibility crumbled, piece by piece. The company he worked for, a family-oriented brand, distanced itself. His name quietly disappeared from the website. Brand deals vanished. Friends unfollowed him. Some posted vague quotes about remembering who really raised you. He deleted the original post, but it was too late. The internet remembers. He sent me a text, just one line. "Are you happy now?" I didn't reply, not because I wanted revenge, because he still didn't understand. This wasn't about punishment, it was about truth. And truth, once spoken, doesn't need to scream. A week later, someone slipped a letter under my door, no name, just handwriting I recognized instantly. It read, "I didn't know people would turn on me like that. I was just trying to be honest. But maybe your version of honest is different. Maybe yours is quieter, but heavier. I'm sorry if I made you look bad. That wasn't my goal. I just didn't know how to say thank you anymore." I folded the letter and placed it in the binder, under August. Not because it made things right, but because it was the first time he admitted there was something to be sorry for, even if he didn't say it out loud. Even if it came in the shadow of public shame. I still didn't respond. Not to the letter, not to the texts, not to the podcast that wanted to interview me. I had said what needed to be said, in silence, in paper, in truth. And now the world spoke back. Not for me. For every mother who ever wondered if she was allowed to count the cost of love. The envelope was cream-colored, the kind you buy in a hurry but seal with hesitation. My name was written on it. Not Ellen, not Mrs. Harris, but something I hadn't seen in writing for years. Mom. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was neat, unsure in parts, like someone who hadn't written by hand in a long time. The letter began simply, "I hope this reaches you before he deletes my account." That was the first line. It took my breath. She went on. I watched everything unfold online. I saw how they turned on you, and I'm ashamed it took strangers to say what I should have said years ago. I sat down slowly, my hands trembling just enough to blur the ink. Thank you, not just for raising him, but for reminding me that I'm not crazy. The next few lines came fast, like she'd been holding them in. He controls everything, our accounts, our passwords, even my email. I used a coworker's phone to send this. He said you were dangerous, that you'd try to poison our marriage, that you were manipulative, bitter, obsessed with money. I believed him. The words curled into my chest like smoke, but then I saw those binders, and I saw you. Not as the woman he described, but as the woman who raised him when no one else would, who worked, sacrificed, stayed silent. You were never bitter, just tired. I paused, took a breath. The next line felt like a whisper from across generations. I want to leave him. She didn't elaborate right away. The next paragraph was all fear. Fear of custody battles, of being labeled unstable, of being blamed. He says if I leave, he'll make sure I never see our daughter again. He says he'll bury me in court. He has screenshots, recordings. He says he knows people. My fists clenched. I had known that tone before, the quiet panic in women who smile through dinners but cry in bathrooms. She continued, but when I saw your binder, I realized he learned that silence from somewhere, and I don't want our daughter learning it too. Then, the final twist. Would you let us stay with you? Just for a little while, until I can figure things out. I know this is asking too much, but I don't have anyone else, and you've always felt like someone who would never let a woman fall. Love, Emily? I read the letter 3 times, the first time with disbelief, the second with anger, the third with something I couldn't name. Grief, maybe, for all the women like us. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and texted the number she scribbled at the bottom. The door is open. Come home. They arrived 2 days later. She looked thinner. Not in the way people admire, but in the way people ache. Her eyes scanned the driveway, like she was expecting him to jump out of the bushes. She held her daughter's hand tightly. My granddaughter, with hair the same soft brown as her father's when he was little. I hugged her gently. She didn't let go for a long time. When we stepped inside, she whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Not Mrs. Harris, not Ellen, just Mom. I hadn't cried for myself in years, but that name, the way she said it, made something inside me finally collapse. Not from pain, from relief. The courthouse smelled like old wood and cold air. It always did. Justice rarely came with warmth. Emily held my hand as we walked through the double doors. Her fingers trembled. Her face was pale but determined. I had seen that look before. In the mirror, 30 years ago, she was about to face a man who would rather burn the house down than admit he hadn't built it. But this time, she wasn't walking in alone. This time, the silence came with witnesses. The lawsuit he filed against me had been quietly dismissed weeks ago. Frivolous, the judge said, flipping through the binder of receipts I had submitted without a word. He didn't even look at my son, just raised an eyebrow at the man trying to sue his mother for reminding him of the truth. The court saw through it. But now, the courtroom wasn't about me. It was about her, about custody, about safety. And unexpectedly, it became about something more. It became about history. The judge reviewed the financial records. Emily's injuries, text messages, voice recordings, even statements from neighbors who had heard shouting through the walls. It was open and shut. But when my son took the stand, he didn't talk about her, he talked about me. She manipulated Emily, he said. She turned my wife against me. She's been poisoning my family for years. The judge leaned forward. Are you suggesting your mother, who raised you alone, who never remarried, who has no criminal record, has masterminded a conspiracy against you? My son swallowed. She sent me a binder of receipts. The courtroom paused. Receipts? The judge repeated. For what she spent on me growing up? There was a soft chuckle from someone in the gallery. The judge silenced it. I see, he said. And in this binder, were there lies? No, he admitted. But it was emotionally manipulative. The judge raised one brow. Would you prefer she'd kept silent and let your daughter think her grandmother was a ghost? My son didn't answer. But everyone heard the silence loud and clear. Emily's testimony was short, steady, unshaken. She told them about the bank accounts he'd locked, the phone he monitored, the day he deleted her contact with her own mother, the night he punched the wall an inch from her face. She never cried. She didn't have to. Truth doesn't need tears to tremble. The judge granted her full custody. Immediate relocation approved. Supervised visitation pending further review. He sat there, my son, mouth slightly open, as if the world had betrayed him. But the world had only finally opened its eyes. We thought it was over, up until the judge turned to the back of the courtroom. "To the biological father of Mr. Harris," he said, "would you please rise?" My ex-husband stood slowly. He hadn't expected to be called. "You were court-ordered to pay child support from July 1997 to June 2015. Are you aware that 0 payments were ever received?" He cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor, but there was no enforcement." "That doesn't negate the debt," the judge interrupted. "You owed support. You failed to provide it. That's a financial abandonment of your legal responsibility." He looked stunned. "I will be issuing a retroactive enforcement order. The amount due, with interest, is calculated at $94,287.00. Collection begins immediately. Failure to comply will result in garnishment, liens, or incarceration." My son turned to him, wide-eyed. "You said that was over," he whispered. My ex didn't respond. 2 generations of men. One thought he was owed gratitude without responsibility. The other thought he was owed silence without consequence. Now both stood in the same courtroom, stripped of their illusions. And I sat quietly in the back, holding my granddaughter's hand. When it was over, Emily hugged the lawyer. We stepped into the sunlight, bright, unforgiving, beautiful. She looked at me. "I couldn't have done it without you." I shook my head. "You did it because of you. I was just your shadow." "No," she said. "You were my light." I didn't argue. Not because she was right, but because sometimes when someone calls you light, you don't correct them, you just let yourself shine. The house felt different now. Quieter, yes, but not hollow. It was the kind of quiet that comes from peace, not absence. The kind of quiet where you can hear the soup simmer, the pages turn, the garden stretch in the morning sun. Emily moved into the spare room with my granddaughter. We rearranged furniture, painted the walls a soft blue, replaced the old curtains with ones she found at a thrift store, yellow, cheerful, embroidered with little daisies. The room breathed again. So did I. In the mornings, I taught my granddaughter how to water the tomatoes just right, not too much, not too shallow. Her tiny fingers touched every leaf like they were precious. In the afternoons, I showed Emily how to knead dough with care, not fear. We made bread from scratch, then jam, then pie. She laughed for the first time in months when the crust burned a little. "I used to think I couldn't cook," she said, licking sugar from her thumb. "You just needed a kitchen that loved you back," I smiled. We didn't talk much about the past, not because we were avoiding it, because we were busy building a new one. I watched Emily regain her posture, her voice no longer trembling at the end of every sentence. She spoke freely now, laughed without looking over her shoulder. And my granddaughter, bright, curious, resilient, became the glue we never asked for, but desperately needed. One night, I found her at the dining table, tongue sticking out slightly as she wrote. "What you working on, sweetheart?" I asked. "My essay," she said. "We're supposed to write about someone who inspires us." I expected her to say her mom, but she looked up, smiled, and said, "It's about you." I blinked. "Me?" She nodded. I called it The Mother I Got Twice. My heart stilled. She read aloud, "Some people are lucky. They have 2 grandmas. I'm luckier. I have a grandma who's also my second mom. She didn't just teach me how to grow tomatoes or make jelly. She taught my real mom how to smile again. She keeps us safe. She's soft but strong. She's the kind of quiet that makes everything feel okay." I couldn't speak for a full minute. When I finally found my voice, I whispered, "Thank you, baby." She shrugged. I just wrote the truth. Truth. That word again. So simple. So heavy. It had broken our family, yes, but now piece by piece it was gluing us back together. No shouting, no courtroom, just sunlight, bread dough, and one girl's honest words. And for the first time in my long, quiet life, I thought, maybe this is what healing really looks like. He came back on a Wednesday. It was cloudy, the kind of day that makes you think of unfinished letters and things left unsaid. The garden had just been watered. Emily was in the kitchen kneading dough, and Lily was reading on the porch. When the knock came, none of us expected it. 3 gentle taps. Not urgent, not weak, just tired. Emily peeked through the window, her breath caught in her throat. "It's him," she whispered. I looked up from my chair in the living room, knitting needles paused mid-air. "Him who, dear?" She didn't answer right away. I stood slowly, feeling the quiet ache in my knees, an old companion. I walked to the door as she opened it. There he stood, David, my son. But to me, in that moment, he was a stranger, with eyes I once might have known. His shirt was wrinkled, beard overgrown, shoes dirty. He looked thinner, like someone who'd been running from something for a very long time, and finally decided to stop. He tried to smile. "Hi, Mom," he said. I tilted my head. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Do I know you?" His face faltered. Emily stepped in gently. "She has memory lapses, David. It comes and goes." He looked at me again, eyes wet. "It's okay," he said. "I deserve that." We sat in the garden. Lily stayed near, watching from the swing. David sipped the tea I made him. He held the cup with both hands like it might fall if he wasn't careful. "I've been living out of a friend's spare room," he said quietly. "No job, no money, no excuses." I listened. No judgment, no pity. Just silence. He went on. "I was angry. All the time. Even when I was winning. Especially when I was winning. And I thought, if I could just blame someone, it would make sense." He paused, looking at the steam rise from the cup. "But blaming you never made me feel better. Just emptier." I reached out and placed my hand over his. He stared at it, then he pulled something from his jacket, a folded paper, yellowed at the edges. "I never read the last page until recently," he said. He opened it and began to read aloud. "If the day ever comes when you want to apologize, don't bring flowers, don't write a speech. Just live as if you once knew how to love, and that will be enough." He folded the letter carefully. "I don't know if I ever did know how to love." I looked at him. "I think," I said slowly, "you're starting to remember." That evening, Emily and Lily prepared a simple meal: roast chicken, garden potatoes, warm bread. David stayed, hesitating at every gesture of kindness like it was a trap. After dinner, he helped clear the table, washed the dishes, dried every plate by hand, silently. Before he left, he stood at the door for a long time. "I don't expect to be forgiven," he said, "but I wanted you to know. I see it now. What you gave, what I broke." I stepped forward. "I may not remember everything," I said softly, "but I remember this." I placed my hand on his cheek. "Once, you were a boy who made me laugh so hard I dropped my keys in the flour." He laughed, despite himself. "I remember that," he whispered. "Then there's still hope," I smiled. Days passed. He came again the next week. Then the week after that, not to ask for anything, just to be useful. He trimmed the hedges, painted the fence, repaired a broken step on the porch. Always quiet, always waiting. One Sunday, Lily brought me a drawing. It was of our house. 3 women in the garden, me, Emily, Lily, and standing outside the gate, holding flowers, was a man with a nervous smile. "I drew, Daddy," she said. I blinked. "That's your father?" She nodded. "He says he wants to be better." I kissed her forehead. "Then we'll let him try." One morning, I found David sitting on the porch steps, eyes red. I sat beside him. He pulled a crumpled photo from his wallet. Me holding him as a toddler, both of us laughing, covered in frosting. "I forgot this existed," he said. I nodded. "That was your 5th birthday. You refused to eat cake with a spoon." He smiled. "So I used my hands." I smiled back. And your feet, he chuckled, then grew quiet. I wish I'd remembered more of that, instead of just being mad at everything. You were hurt, I said, and hurt people look for targets. But I hit the wrong one. I shook my head. You hit the one closest to you. That's how pain works. He looked down. Can I ever make it right? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, don't make it right, just make it better. That fall, Lily entered a writing contest again. This time her essay was called The Day My Dad Learned to Listen. It didn't win a prize, but it won something greater. David framed it, hung it in his new apartment. Small, modest, but his. Years later, when my memory faded completely, he came every week, read to me, brushed my hair, planted roses in the garden because he knew I used to love them, even if I couldn't tell him so anymore. One day, Emily asked him why he kept coming when I didn't even know his name. He smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. She may not remember me, he said, but I remember the woman who taught me what love sounds like. And then he turned to Lily and added, and now it's my turn to pass that on. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you've ever been betrayed and still left the porch light on, hoping somehow they'd find their way back. If you've ever raised a child with both hands and both knees and watched them walk away as if you'd never carried them. If you've ever been told you were too much, too emotional, too old, and still chose to love anyway, this story was not just mine, it was yours. Because for women like us, our silence was never weakness, it was the cost of survival. We stayed quiet so they could speak. We stepped back so they could walk forward. We swallowed every insult, every eye roll, every slammed door, and kept the soup warm anyway, not because we didn't feel the hurt, but because we knew love isn't always loud. Sometimes, love looks like showing up to a courtroom with a binder full of truth. Sometimes, love means sewing soles back onto shoes in the middle of the night. Sometimes, love means letting them forget your name if it means they can finally remember who they are. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. So, if you've ever sat in the back of the room while someone else told your story wrong, if you've ever wished someone would say, she didn't ask for applause, but everything you are stands on her shoulders, then let me be the one to say it now. You are not invisible. You are not replaceable. You are not wrong for remembering what they wanted to forget. You are the reason this story exists. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories because silence has a memory. And sometimes, the quietest woman in the room is the one who finally speaks loudest when the world is ready to listen.